Well, hello, everyone. Some of you know me and some of you don't. My name is Wes Allen. I'm the tax ditch project manager with Sussex Conservation District. I've been with the district now 2 years, but I have a background in stormwater, wetland, and environmental work that goes back 20 years. Not only I started in Delaware, but across the whole Mid-Atlantic. Siobhan asked me to come today to talk to you guys about tax ditches. Some of you are familiar, some of you are not. I will just say this thing to start with. Not all ditches in Sussex County are tax ditches. So if you have a ditch in your backyard or a ditch on your roadside, it might be a tax ditch or it might not be a tax ditch. Important thing is you have a lot of resources online. You can go to our website. You can go to DENREC's website. You can find the map to see whether you're on a tax ditch or not. I would recommend doing that before you give us a call. And there's going to be some links. There's links on your sheets to those websites where you can go get the map. But I'm going to do an introduction to tax ditches, and hopefully at the end of this, you guys will understand better what a tax ditch is. You can advance to the next slide. So Sussex Conservation District, our mission is to serve Sussex County by providing technical guidance and financial assistance to enhance, maintain, protect, and improve land and water resources in the county. That's what I do every day, and it's part of our mandate and why we're involved in tax ditch management.
Sorry, I was moving.
No problem. So just in Sussex County, there are 137 separate tax ditch organizations. There's 1,200 plus miles of ditch. 394 square miles, 340,000 acres. About 42% of the county is drained by tax ditches, and most of it is 1950s infrastructure. There are 234 tax ditch organizations in the total state of Delaware, so about 60% of the tax ditch miles are in Sussex County. Some of these tax ditches are 46 miles long. That's the biggest one, 46 plus miles long. That's Pepper Creek around Millsboro, Delaware. And there's tax ditches that are less than an acre, or less than a mile and that drain less than 2 acres. And the biggest tax ditch is the biggest acreage drainage tax ditch is partly in Sussex County as well. And that's the Marshy Hope on the western half of the county, but it goes into Kent County as well. And that's 56,000 acres is drained by that one tax ditch system alone. So tax ditches, not unique, fairly unique to Delaware. I mean, there's some other systems in other states that are similar to this, but it was really established by state law in 1951. That created the DENREC Division of Watershed Stewardship. And Title VII, Chapter 41 is the tax ditch law. But it basically sets up the DENREC and the conservation districts to support administration, planning, construction, and maintenance of these tax ditch systems. So the purpose of a ditch. Well, a ditch cannot be formed, a government, Sussex Conservation District or DENREC cannot say, hey, we want to form a tax ditch. It has to be requested by one or more landowners in that particular geography or watershed. So they do what's called petition the court. So they write a petition to Superior Court of Delaware, and they say, hey, we have a need for drainage improvement or flooding protection, natural resource management. They submit the petition to Superior Court. Superior Court sends it back to the Conservation District, and our board meets and says, hey, we think this is a good idea. We think it's a necessary idea. We then forward that to DENREC, the Division of Watershed Stewardship, and DENREC basically goes out and assesses the feasibility of the ditch. Is it feasible? Is it economically feasible? Is it going to provide the benefit that we think it's going to provide? So if it's decided that the tax ditch is going to provide that benefit, then what they do is they send it back to the Board of Ditch Commissioners, and they hold a meeting, and basically the landowners will vote to determine whether they're going to form that tax ditch or not. So most of the tax ditches have been formed. There are 2, right? 2 in the process in Sussex County, I believe, but I think one, really one.
There were 3, there's 3, but 2 of them may or may not.
Right, so really one is kind of
Really, one that's
moving forward right now. So once the tax ditches are formed, again, chapter 7 or title 7, chapter 41, it basically lays out what the responsibilities of a tax ditch are. So a tax ditch, number one, I'm gonna have to use my notes on these because there's too many for me to remember off the top of my head. Number one, levy taxes. So taxes are determined by what's called the warrant rate. And the warrant is based on the construction cost of that tax ditch. And based on how it's funding, it determines, sometimes it's 50%, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more of what the warrant rate is. So if you live in a ditch that was built in the 1960s, your warrant rate's gonna be, your top of your warrant is gonna be less than a newer ditch because construction costs were less. So some ditches, even though they're very, very long, the maximum amount of taxes they could collect might only be 60,000, 30,000, just depends on the cost of that ditch. And then this is the confusing part because these taxes that are on, if you live in a watershed that's part of a tax ditch, it'll be on your Sussex County tax bill. It'll be on that tax bill. Your tax ditch for your warrant rate for that tax ditch is not determined by your property value. So a lot of people have been concerned recently, that everything's getting reassessed. So obviously my taxes are gonna go up, but your tax ditch taxes are not based on property value. What they are based on is the benefit of drainage you received or your property received when that tax ditch was created. So, and that has a maximum value, and how that was determined was it's the size of your property and where it is on the watershed. They determine what percent benefit, what benefit you got when that tax ditch was installed, and that's how they determine, what rate you can pay. Now, most tax ditches, they only collect 3%, 3 to 15% of what the total they can collect on. So most of your tax ditch taxes are not that big, but it is up to the tax ditch association once it's formed to determine how much of that warrant rate they're going to use. And some people have raised their warrants a lot because maintenance costs are continuing to go up. You can sue or be sued in the name of the tax ditch. You can make contracts. So meaning you can enter into a contract with a maintenance firm or with SCD to do maintenance work on your ditch. You can borrow money. You can acquire real estate. You can cooperate or enter into agreements with a federal or government agency. You can exercise eminent domain if necessary. You can accept contribution from landowners. So let's say that, something wasn't built and this landowner wants to add something onto the tax ditch, or it's something that's going to benefit just them. You can enter an agreement with that landowner and accept money for them to add, increase the right of way or add infrastructure that wasn't built as part of the ditch. You can call DENREC for assistance to help administrate the tax ditch. And you can also transfer responsibility to DENREC. There is a provision, but it's
I'm not sure how.
very, very vague. And it's just in the regulations, and I don't think it's ever been done before.
Not that I'm aware of.
So that's kind of the legal background, and the formation, the warrant rates, and then administration. Tax ditches are required to meet at least annually. They have officers that are elected, they're landowners that live in the tax ditch watershed. You usually have a chairman, a manager, and a secretary treasurer. Depending on the size of the ditch, you may have more than one manager. The responsibility of those officers are to, obviously, they get calls and answer calls about drainage issues on the area. They hold the annual meeting. They determine if they need to, raise taxes, and they have to be bonded as well to make sure that they can get financial assistance, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Sure. So again, I work for Sussex County, Sussex Conservation District, and we provide a basic set of services to help the tax ditches out. Next slide, please. So Our basic services, we assist DENREC, and we perform site evaluations. We respond to drainage complaints. We also get calls from tax ditch managers, and we'll go out and take a look to see if there's any maintenance issues. Next slide, please. One of the big things we do, and as part of the statute, is we administer a cost share program for tax ditches in Sussex County with 3921 funds from DENREC and Sussex County. You have to have an annual meeting. You have to have your financial books audited by DENREC. They provide that service, and you have to be bonded in order to apply for cost share funding. Now, cost share funding, the basic amount we get is $75,000 from DENREC, and we get $125,000 from Sussex County. So that's a $200,000 pool of 3921 funds over that 134 ditches in Sussex County. So obviously, with the bare minimum, it's very tough to do a lot of maintenance work. But we also work with legislators, and they put additional funding into the program. Last year, they put additional funding in, and this year, at the end of the day, the Sussex Conservation District and the tax ditches had $700,000 available for cost share funding. Now that in the past, we've done 50-50 match on our programs for cost share, but this year we're able to, on maintenance work, which we'll talk about what we define as maintenance work. That would be like dip out, right of way clearing, pipe installation, structure installation, erosion control. Those things we're able to offer 60% this year based on the funding. So some of the services, the maintenance service we talked about, dip out, spread spoils. Okay, I mean, you guys know that the soil around here in most places is fairly sandy, fairly erosive. And so over time, these tax ditches fill up with sediment. So depending on the soil types, depending on the land use, as you know, a lot of the land use has changed. A lot of ground disturbance. So, every 10 to 25 years, you need to dip these ditches out. You might need to do it even more frequently than that, but dip them out basically to allow the drainage to flow freely. Spreading spoil. One of the reasons why there's a large right of way on some of these tax ditches is an area where you can spread the spoils out. The cost of actually transporting that soil would be, very cost prohibitive to do a maintenance work. Emergency repairs, just the other day, if you guys live around Greenwood or have seen, there's been a ton of rain in Greenwood this year. And we did a lot of work with the tornado before that, but was a big, basically wad of grass in a ditch that had completely blocked it off and was flooding the whole floodplain. Those are the type of emergency repairs that we have to go out and do, or a pipe gets clogged or a pipe breaks. We do pipe installation, pipe replacements, and invasive species management. So one of the programs we offer is the weed wiper bar. A weed wiper basically is a tractor mounted bar. It's got a membrane on it. We can set the bar at a certain height so we can go after trees and invasive species and leave a lot of the natives and the beneficial stuff on the buffers alone. We offer 50% cost share on that. We also do hand spraying on Phragmites and other types of invasive species. And then one of the big things we've added this year is working with DENREC with some other funds. We've expanded the parrot feather treatment program, which is in both the Nanticoke and the Pocomoke watersheds, the parrot feather. Blake, you're going to talk about, Blake will be talking more about that. Next slide. So again, the walls come from the 1950s. A lot of these ditches were built a long time ago. There's not many that have been built recently. The infrastructure is getting old. Tax ditch organizations are facing more and more challenges. So we talked about funding. If you're only collecting 3% of a $30,000 warrant, you've done that for years, you don't have a lot of money in the bank account. And the costs have gone up very rapidly. So we understand funding is a challenge. That's why we, again, try to reach out, work with legislators to get more money for funding into the cost share program. Officer recruitment, officer retention. I know there's some tax ditch officers in the room right now. It's very difficult It's a volunteer position. It's, you know, very difficult to respond to people and to be an officer. So we realized that back in the day, a lot of these ditches were in an agricultural area. There was less people. Most people who petitioned for the ditch, they knew everything about the ditch. They did a lot of work on the ditch themselves. And a lot of that knowledge is gone and the land use has changed. And there's more and more people. So again, having officers and retaining officers is very, very tough. Operations and management. So there is a lot in the law that sets out, you know, how these tax ditches are petitioned for, organized, how they're administered. But there's not anything in the regulations really of what maintenance do you have to do? You know, what's the most important thing? What should we be focusing on? So a lot of times, again, you know, you had these guys that had been around for years who were farmers, they did a lot of drainage work on, you know, they kind of had that institutional knowledge. A lot of that is gone now. Changing land use, again, at the end of the day, you know, you look at 42% of the county being drained by these tax ditches, and there's a lot of other ditches in Sussex County. Sussex County was basically a swamp, you know, and it was started to be ditched when, you know, Europeans started moving in. That's when the ditch system started to be built. Some of the earliest ditch systems were from the 1700s. So without ditches, you know, this area would be a swamp. It was ditched. It was needed for agriculture. And now that the land use is changing, these tax ditches are part of a stormwater management. So a lot of the stormwater systems are directed into these tax ditches. So they're still very important, but the land use has changed. You have a lot more impervious surface, et cetera. You can increase runoff. Aging infrastructure. Again, a lot of this was built in the 50s or earlier. A lot of the galvanized pipes that were put in when these ditches were built are starting to fail. So you just have more and more issues as these ditches get older. Education, again, you're here today. A lot of people don't even know what a tax ditch is. You know, they just say, oh, I heard somebody say tax ditch, and they might have a roadside swale, but they call and say, I have a tax ditch problem. So not all, you know, it's important that we educate the public as to what a tax ditch is and why it's there and why it's important to keep and maintain. And again, a lot of the original people that were around when these ditches were formed are passing away, or they've moved away, and the farmers aren't there anymore. And permitting issues. I think we're working really good on the permitting issues right now, but I'm here to help work through the permitting issues. So I want to make sure you guys know that we're a resource, that DENREC's a resource to make sure you get the permitting done correctly. I know that in the past, a lot of people haven't known where to go for help, but we're here to help you permit everything properly so we can get work done. So in response to that, we have started a tax ditch pilot program, and there's a couple people in the room that are involved in it. Next slide. And it's basically to enhance the services that we're providing. And it's in a response to a lot of the challenges we just talked about. In 2022, we added, we wanted to add 10, but 9 ditches participated. And we've added 5 more this year. And we plan to, as long as we can keep it funded, to add more and more ditches to this pilot program. And basically provide enhanced services. So the easiest way to look at it is basically I'm helping to provide the tax ditch managers with an operations and maintenance plan. Basically, you know, here's what your annual maintenance costs that you have to factor in. That would be like mowing or weed wiping or treatment. And then here's your capital costs. This is what you need this year, 2 years, 5 years plus to maintain the ditch. So we attend the annual tax ditch. We do an annual assessment of the tax ditch. Basically, I walk the entire, it's basically a watershed assessment. Walk the whole ditch, identify the issues, provide technical assistance to managers and constituents, and make warrant rate recommendations. So by doing the annual assessment, I can better go to the tax ditch managers and say, hey, this is why you need to raise your warrant. Look at the costs you have coming down the road. And hopefully, you know, this year we had more warrant rate raises than we've ever had. And it's just it's recognizing that we need to make sure that we're collecting enough money to do the work on these tax ditches. Next slide, please. So again, funding application and preparation. I'm going to help you with the 3921 cost share funds. But also I want to identify other opportunities. There's Chesapeake Bay funding, there's non-point source funding, there's a whole bunch of other funding that we can use to, on these, some of these tax ditch projects, to not just do regular maintenance, but also maybe do water quality enhancement. So I'm here to help bring some of that money in. Also assist in the permitting process. I'll do all the paperwork, turn it into DENREC to make sure your permit gets processed. We do the ENOI, the stormwater portion of the permitting in-house now, that you don't have to do, the tax managers don't have to do that anymore. And we'll also work with DENREC that when the permit's ready, we'll get the plan signed and set up all the signage and stuff that we need to do to make sure that permit is done. Also, just real quick, that's a weed wiper bar. If tractor on that picture.
Oh, I'm dying.
Don't die. It's not that bad. Go ahead.
So where do you say, that map you had? I go to Sussex County Conservation
Oh,
District
grab another.
website, and am I able to find?
Yeah, if
From the area where I live, all the tax ditches like
We
Fenwick
can
Island?
navigate to it after.
yeah, we'll show it after we get done,
Okay.
we'll go to it. Further thing is, again, that's developing the annual maintenance plan. Basically, like I said, operation and maintenance plan is what we're trying to develop with the assessment. Also, we want to attend all the tax ditch meetings. We'll also, do a lot of these services for people that aren't in the pilot program, but we'll attend all the tax ditch meeting and then we'll present the annual report to the tax ditch if they want us to. Next slide. It's just some of what we were doing is, depending on the size of the ditch, we're gonna give the ditch 6,000 to 10,000 a year. They could use for maintenance purposes. And then again, depending on the size of the ditch, we're gonna charge a management fee of $1,500 to $2,000. At the end of the day, we're charging less than the value of the services that the tax ditches are getting, but we think it's important because it's, if we develop good operations and maintenance plans for these ditches, we're gonna be able to financially plan better for them, but we also get a lot more work done on the ditch system. So again, 10 in 2022, we basically want to demonstrate that this proposed model is successful and adds value to the organizations that we participate with.
Oh, were you done?
I'm done.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, that's tax ditch 101. We could talk about it for a really long time, but it gives you the basics. If you want to go to the website. and
I was
we
saying,
should-
for those joining virtually, I think Jenna Talbot had put a link in the chat, but we can navigate to that.
Yeah.
Once we get to the Q&A section.
Okay, perfect. Are we gonna do the Q&A session now, or are we gonna?
11. So we're gonna do all three presentations, or if you want to do it now, we can.
I can do it real quick. Go ahead.
Now, the pilot program, you're not replacing the officers in the tax district.
No.
You're just providing assistance.
Yeah, I'm just providing assistance. At the end of the day, I can do the assessment, I write the report, I have recommendations. But it's still the tax ditch officers, have to make the final decision. We just hope to give them a little bit more information so they can make better management decisions. A lot of times in the past, some of the tax ditch officers can probably attest to this. They get a phone call from a squeaky wheel, and that's the phone call they receive over and over and over again. And they, respond to that and do that work where there might be an issue someplace that nobody's calling about. That's more important. So we can also help with the squeaky wheel by saying like, here's what we're doing, here's the next step. And your issue will be addressed.
All right.
All right.
The surroundings of the tax ditch, and when you go out to do an assessment of the tax ditch, are you looking at the same kind of issues you might see in a stormwater pond? As far as the slope, the material around or in the ditch?
Somewhat.
Being a buffer and,
Yeah, so tax ditches are formed and they have right of ways. Some have two-sided right of ways, some have one-sided right of ways.
So I was gonna pull up the map here.
Right.
It can probably help
The
show.
widths of the right of ways vary. You can also go through a process to narrow those. But ultimately, what you're looking at is first and foremost, are there any blockages? Is the tax ditch draining properly? Sometimes that involves erosion or, looking at the soil types. Second thing we're gonna look at is, do we have access down the right of way or any trees down, anything like that. And then we're gonna start looking at invasive species and anything that could cause future issues. At the end of the day, the right of way is owned by the landowner. It's just an easement. So a lot of times there's issues on the right of way. If they don't affect the tax ditch, if there was like a tree down, but it wasn't in the ditch, it was on the right of way, technically it's the responsibility of the landowner to take care of. But a lot of times we'll go through and clean it up because we gotta have the right of way open. Whereas if a tree fell in the ditch and was causing a drainage issue, that's something that the tax ditch would respond to.
So I was gonna zoom in a little bit here if you want to explain some of this.
So if you here, like for example, this is Georgetown. So if you look up, when you open this map up, which is under our website, under equipment section, and it'll say tax ditch map, you can pull this up and it'll show you the purple lines on the map. That's the watershed boundary. So everything in this purple box here would be part of Eli Wall's tax ditch. And if you zoom in, you can see by this one, it has a 60-foot. Well, the crazy thing is you see this right here, that's the bypass. So this looks a little bit different now.
Okay.
So
we need to
but-
pick a different one?
No, it's fine. Ultimately, you can see there's different right of ways. So this is 120 foot from the top of the bank. And then this is 60 foot from the center line. So CL is center line. That means that the right of way starts in the middle of the ditch. And TOB, top of bank, will tell you it's starting from the top of the bank. And again, obviously, most ag and forest are 120 to 80. And then,
Zoom in anymore. Is it gonna be different?
no, it's just gonna, no.
Alright.
You can't see on this map, but if you come, like go into town here, you zoom in right here. Like you can see that it went from 80 feet here to 25 foot top of bank here. And this is where Revelation is. It used to be 16 mile. That's what called where a court order change happened. So they turned it into to DNREC, and DNREC, they did the paperwork. DNREC sent it to the tax ditch officers, and they determined that it was okay to have a 25 foot top of bank right away there. You can see though, zoom out, that the process has gotten better, much better, but there's a lot of development that happened right away. So you can see that the apartment complex here is in the right of way. The doctor's office here is in the right of way. We do respond to right of way issues. A lot of these are old and there's nothing we can do about them, but if you see a fence go up or a shed get put in, please reach out to DNREC or us, and we can come out and help you out. Again, sometimes things have gone too far, but the county is doing a better job of putting it on all the deeds now, and they are doing a better job, when people go get building permits to check it. But sometimes people put sheds in without building permits or put fences in without building permits, so it is an issue. All right.
Very good. Thank you. Or questions?
As a tax ditch officer, I understand, for many years, I understand why they were created and how the land has